So let's look at some of these other players in the progressive era, which in many ways is a comprehensive, comes close to being a comprehensive era as far as reform. The exceptions being, of course, civil rights for African Americans. Uh, some sort of attempt to combat Jim Crowism, lynchings, um, at least from the part of the public policy. Native Americans are still losing land under the Dawes Act. Um, and of course, you have the Chinese Exclusion Act and other stuff related to immigration from East Asia. But by the end of this era, women are going to have the right to vote. There's going to be some sort of breaking up of monopolies, regulation of corporations, regulation of consumer products to make sure they're safe, child labor laws, some sort of more oversight of currency and whatnot. Um, and that happens for various reasons. One of them being the media. The media, what we know as the media, what is referred to here as print journalism, right? Now, the reason I specify print journalism, obviously from 1900 to 1916, there's no radio. Radio does exist. It was invented in 1899 by Marconi, but is not in the household of every American. It's not a form of a way to get news and entertainment, right? And clearly no television. Movies do exist. I'm not sure how evolved the Nickelodeon concept of going to see the movies is at this point, but no real like go to the movies, pay a dime, you see a serial, you see a cartoon, you see a newsreel, right? So news is coming from print journalism, right? But just because it's in print does not take away from the importance of technology in it, right? You have the telegraph invented in 1840, so the telegraph is able to transmit information. So something like triangle happens in New York, in Chicago, San Francisco, St. Louis, they know about it in the paper the next day. That's very important in creating some sort of awareness, a sense of community, a sense of we should do something as Americans about these things, right? Um, so let's look at some of these elements of print journalism. Some of these journalists who were referred to as muckrakers, right? As in, raking the muck, stirring the pot, right? Kicking up dirt, exposing truth, which can sometimes be muddy, dirty. You have Ida Tarbell, who did a lot of stuff with McClure's magazine, which is one of the more mainstream magazines at the time. Puck, McClure's. Ida Tarbell, who went after U.S. Steel, who went after John Rockefeller, exposing various elements of Rockefeller's life, his rise to power, that were unethical, immoral, arguably criminal. Actually, a noteworthy part of this attack on Rockefeller, or various expose on Rockefeller, expose doesn't matter. She actually did a character study on Rockefeller, multiple part, published in multiple editions. John D. Rockefeller, a character study, right? Which she opens with the concept that this is a quote, a quotation. The public not only has the right to know what sort of man he, Rockefeller, is, it is the duty of the public to know. The time is here when Mr. Rockefeller must face the verdict of the public by which he lives. Right? This idea that these captains of industry, or I'm sure Ida Tarbell would call them robber barons, they're not some sort of nobility in the medieval period that are not subject to some sort of public scrutiny. We are citizens. This idea of equality, this idea that you have to answer for what you're doing. You have all this wealth. You've garnered all this capital together in business and privately profited. How is that? How exactly is what you're doing benefiting the general good, like the utilitarian principle? And how is it that you came about achieving all this wealth? Was it through ethical means, legal means? Upton Sinclair. This is an important one because this deals with Upton Sinclair, who wrote a series of stories about the Chicago meatpacking industry, which was eventually published into a book in 1906 called The Jungle. Notice that it was eventually published into a book, which is why The Jungle on this slide is in italics. The articles around it here are in quotation marks. That's MLA. Remember that for your future assignments. I'm teaching you here all over the place. This is an important one. A lot of you maybe read this in high school. It deals with the Chicago meatpacking industry. It deals with the unsanitary, unhygienic, really grotesque realities of the meatpacking industry at the time. No regulation, no Food and Drug Administration, no oversight really of is this stuff being prepared in a safe way? Not safe way, but is it being prepared in a hygienic way? People were buying milk formula that was bad. You know, a bulk of the casualties of the deaths during the Spanish-American War were the result of rotten beef the government purchased, right? Because there's no one there to say, hey, there's a rat in that soda can. Do you know what I'm saying? In fact, there's actually cocaine in soda cans, which I don't have a problem with personally, but you know what I'm saying? You get my point. As far as oversight of consumer protection, not only is the work environment where this stuff is being produced, is it safe for the worker, but is what eventually is being produced, the food, the household item, is it safe for the consumer, right? Um, this is important. It's regulating the work environment, regulating consumer products, generally speaking. Right? Eventually, the depression with the New Deal, you have the government goes even further because you have a moment where, well, it doesn't matter now if the work environment is safe because there are no jobs. It doesn't matter if the product they make is healthy because people don't have any money to buy it. Right? There's a whole other thing. But right here we have consumer protection, some labor protection, reining in this handful of very, very wealthy people that have gotten wealthy, not just with the help of the government, subsidies, tax breaks, railroads getting lots of land, National Guard troops coming in to protect property, to protect factory owners, right? And so now the government's saying, well, we've created a situation, tariffs, protective tariffs, right? We've created a situation for you to get wealthy. It's not really being shared equally. So, so we got Tarbell, Sinclair, who published in the Jungle series in Appeal to Reason, which is the well circulated socialist leading newspaper of the time. This is before the Russian Revolution, before the Soviet Union, before the communist dictatorships we are familiar with in the 20th century. So socialism is not tainted in American eyes for the most part, unless of course you're someone like Rockefeller who doesn't want to be economically equal to everyone because he's really rich. Who would want it? Yeah. Anyways. So the Jungle, which is in many ways directly responsible, very influential in the passage of the Meat Inspection Act, obviously, right? The meatpacking industry. Let's inspect these meatpacking plants. Let's inspect these products. And then eventually the Food and Drug Administration, right? Today we have lobbyists, which complicates the Food and Drug Administration because lobbyists can come in, pharmaceutical companies can write laws, can do all sorts of stuff to really curb the relevance of an agency like that. But initially, just, hey, maybe we should have some sort of outside element outside of this company that's making medicine or that's making food, just to go in and make sure that it's being done correctly, it's being done in a safe way, right? Plus, I mean, you look at some of the ads back then, there's people advertising their product to cure all sorts of stuff, right? So we have, and that still exists now with herbal stuff, but whatever. You get my point. Emma Goldman, so we have Tarbell is definitely a well-known as far as the expose thing. The work that Tarbell does, you can really relate to. If you want to look at a more contemporary example, go look up Matt Taibbi, who is a writer for Rolling Stone. Taibbi, Taibbi. I think that's how you pronounce it. After the initial stages of the recession, each issue of Rolling Stone would do this massive expose, this massive story on corporate greed, Wall Street, stuff like that, right? The whole Occupy movement was happening, and similar to what is going on here. So you also have Emma Goldman, who published a magazine called Mother Earth. Emma Goldman, unlike Appeal to Reason, which is more of a socialist paper, Mother Earth is an anarchist leaning, an anarchist magazine. Emma Goldman is an anarchist. She immigrated to this country from Lithuania, worked in, I believe, the garment industry, started organizing for labor, but also organized and advocated for women, not as a suffragist, not a suffragette, not organizing for women to gain the right to vote. She didn't really care about the right to vote. She wanted to have a revolution, overthrow capitalism, and establish some sort of anarchist collective thing, right? The absence of government, the absence of corporate power, people, community, basically controlling everything. It's complicated. I'm not going to get into that. You can take philosophy and learn more about the nuances of these isms. But she published Mother Earth and advocated for various things. She opposed World War One. She advocated against child labor and on behalf of labor generally and unions, but also uh, uh, for women's issues, particularly birth control, not the pill. The pill doesn't exist yet. Not necessarily abortions, just the concept of use of, hey, ladies, there's some science here. You can learn from this stuff, better understand how your body works, better understand how your cycle works, ovulation works, and all sorts of stuff, so that you're not just getting pregnant all the time, because that was happening, right? And remember, we're in a society with no maternity leave, no daycare, let alone minimum wage, child labor laws, nothing. So her argument, for example, from this article she wrote, The Social Aspects of Birth Control, right? She argued society had never, this is a quote, never made the slightest provision in return for the life woman has given. Women will no longer be a party to the crime of bringing hapless children into the world, right? The idea, and this is still an argument made today, the idea that you're not providing any resources for this child to have a chance in life. So therefore, why should you outlaw women? Just, and this is just women controlling, understanding their bodies. Women like Emma Goldman, also Margaret Sanger, who was more moderate politically, who unfortunately sort of played around a little more with the concept of eugenics in justifying controlling birth, right? Like weeding out undesirables or whatever. You can see articles on that. But Emma Goldman, much more geared towards, look, working women are given nothing by society, given nothing by the state, given nothing by their corporate masters, as far as helping them to raise these children in a decent way. Yet, if I hand this woman a pamphlet telling her, hey, here's some ways you can prevent getting pregnant naturally, not the pill, not an abortion, but here's some ways you can just prevent getting pregnant all the time. She was thrown in jail. Margaret Sanger, too, was thrown in jail. Margaret Sanger eventually opens the first Planned Parenthood in 1916. Emma Goldman is eventually deported for opposing World War One, and dies in 1940. But very interesting, very educated national lecturer. Went on lecturing tours all over. Really interesting. Good writer too. Very good writer. W.E.B. Du Bois. Many of you may be familiar with W.E.B. Du Bois. If not, you're familiar with one of the organizations he helped found, the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, in 1908. He edited a magazine called The Crisis, a periodical called The Crisis, which was, as you can see, it says a record of the darker races. It was geared more towards Black history, which you might call alternate history or ethnic studies, right? Like Black history, but sort of in a for us bias kind of a way, learning about Black history from other Black Americans, learning things that you're not going to hear in this era where there's eugenics, where there's concepts of social Darwinism, concepts of European or Anglo Americans or Anglo humans being superior to others in order to justify colonialism. Reconstruction being a mistake, slaves weren't ready for that sort of, all that stuff, right? He's going to write actually a book on Reconstruction, all sorts of stuff. And you're going to look at returning soldiers, this article he wrote in an assignment, or if you're in class, we might discuss it in class, but definitely either whether you're online or in person, that's going to be something that's going to play a prominent role. So I won't go into that one, but yeah, Du Bois, NAACP, probably one of the most brilliant minds of the last century, probably one of the most brilliant minds this country's ever produced. Very good writer, very interesting. If you can get the Du Bois Reader, which is a whole collection of his writing, it's wonderful. Mother Earth, Goldman's stuff is also like in a collection like that.